Good afternoon. My name is John Hunsinger. I'm a docent here at the Thomas Tabor Museum in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. I want to welcome you to the Shempp Toy Train Collection. The Shempp collection is not the largest collection in the United States, but it is one of the larger ones on public display. Mr. Shempp was a caseworker for the Pennsylvania Department of Welfare and is a graduate of Susquehanna University. But he became interested in trains as a child. He was born in 1911. And when he was about 10 years old, his father and he were walking to church and went by a store downtown, and one of the trains in the window was still running. Well, of course, the Shempps contacted the owner, but the owner then asked the young boy, "Would you mind running my trains every year?" Well, this put Mr. Shempp in heaven. So all through high school, he ran the trains around Williamsport in several different stores. He then went to college and came back home and then became a collector his whole life. The collection here in Williamsport is located at the museum, as I mentioned, and it was brought here in 1984. Mr. Shempp, unfortunately, passed away in 1985, but the collection was housed here in this major room. Now, in Williamsport, the Brodart Company has a manufacturing plant to make furniture for libraries. So a group contacted them, and they designed the furniture for in this room. We get many visitors to the museum, and what's interesting about the people who come down to see the Shempp toy collection is there are three types. There's the ordinary tourist who looks at the trains, well, it's a lot of trains, and it's nice and so forth. There are over 2,000 pieces here, over 500 engines, and over 1,100 cars, plus accessories and buildings, etc. The second type of person is a person who, "Oh, Uncle Bill had one of those when we were children, I remember that." Or, "Gee whiz, hey, we had one of those when we were kids." Then there's the third type, and that's the collector. You have a Super 381, you have a Mayflower. Well, here's the Super 381. There's only one in the world. It was handmade either in Italy or in New Jersey. No one knows for sure, but it's the only one ever built, and that is a collector item. Next to it is this regular 381, which was a downsized version because the larger version was so big, an ordinary boy could not handle it. But with the other version, they could handle it. And that shows you our super duper 381. This particular train is a clockwork motor train. All you do is wind it up and it goes. Electric trains, of course, are powered by a small electric motor. But the wind-up trains were very inexpensive. And this one was the circus and everything, $2 in 1935. And a lot of Marx trains, which were also popular, were wind-up trains, many of them, and they sold for $1 back in the 1930s. The red train here is extremely rare. It was made by American Flyer for the J.C. Penney Company. It was not uncommon in those days for different companies like Sarah Roebuck or J.C. Penney to have one of the train manufacturers manufacture a train to be sold at Christmas time through those particular companies. This particular one, the Empire Express, is quite rare because there aren't too many of them around, but also one in this particular condition is almost impossible to find. One of the more interesting items in our collection is this Tunerville trolley. Back in 1922, there was a man who was very upset with a local trolley service. And he was an artist, so he concocted a type of trolley, which was a cartoon type thing. And a German company picked up the idea and manufactured many of them. Most of them were clockwork, but some of them were electric, which this particular one is, which makes it quite rare. Another piece of equipment in this particular case is the Boucher Blue Comet. Boucher was a company out of New York that only manufactured a very small number of trains, but they did put them out, and they went out of business in 1943. But it's the only train made in a standard gauge type that has twin engine power. So it makes it sort of interesting. Other companies also made a Blue Comet, including Lionel. Mr. Shempp had his favorite train, and that favorite train happened to be the famous Mayflower set, made by American Flyer back in the early 1930s. The plane was extremely expensive for that time, so very few of them were sold. In fact, we are told only about 50 ever were sold. Well, they had made more than 50, so they destroyed the rest of them rather than lower the price further. But it is a beautiful train, and even our local people who think it's the most beautiful train ever made. It's quite famous and very rare. Right above it is a 1937 Lionel model train. It's actually made off the plans of the original engine. Someone once said that they counted the rivets on the tender and it's only off by one. I don't know if I believe that, but maybe it did happen. One interesting point about these trains, the ordinary kid in 1931 during the height of the Depression could not afford one. The Mayflower, for instance, started out at $164, and very, very few families could afford that. In 1937, Lionel scale train engine was also quite expensive, and so therefore only fairly well-off to-do people could afford to buy one for their child. It's a really neat engine, though. It's very popular among collectors. The museum is very proud to say they have 9 one-of-a-kind trains, the Super 381 being one, but another one is this one right here, which is hand-built by Lionel and then manufactured in looking like this. And 3 of the engines there, the 3 GG1s, are one of a kind because of the unique color schemes. And the plastic train here is not one of a kind. There were about 25 of those made for the train show of that year so that the people could see how the inside of the new train looked. In the 1930s, they still made standard gauge trains, which is the larger size. And one of the more interesting ones is one put up by Lionel, which was copper plated. Below it, the new smaller trains, which had been around for a long time, but became more modern, streamlined. And there's several beautiful examples of that type of train. And any boy who could get one of those for Christmas was truly thrilled. One of the interesting things in the Shempp collection is we have a large train layout, and children of all ages enjoy pushing the button to make them run. There are also buttons along the edge to operate a gate, operate a signal, etc. And we also have a circus in the one corner, which goes all the time. So it's sort of fun to watch the train, and kids especially love it. Okay, if someone comes in the museum and wants to know about toy trains, here's an exhibit, this whole long cabinet, which starts in the early days of the 1870s all the way to modern times. It gives you an example of the different kinds of trains that were made. And they're exhibited here. You can read the tags and see what a Marx wind-up train looks like, an early Lionel, an older Lionel, the first GG1, some foreign trains, and you can take time and if you wanted to, have a very brief history of all the toy trains. Everyone sort of recognizes a Lionel box that's just orange and so forth, but they also sold trains in sets in a bigger box, and that's an example of that. One of the more interesting things here is an erector set, which was in the early 1930s, and the A.C. Gilbert Company made this particular engine and called it an erector set train. On down here a little bit are examples of all the types of track, but also a Buddy-O riding little train. The Buddy-O company was started by a man and he made these trains and other toys, trucks and so forth, out of automobile fender material. And they were sturdy, you could ride them around and they're there forever. The oldest train in our collection is an 1877 model, which was powered by alcohol. And they would run these on track in a home. I hope I didn't dump one over because it would start a fire. This is a beautiful example of local wood carving. This is an engine carved between 1932 and 1934 by a local man. But look at the detail.